Thank you all for coming out tonight to our fourth of our restructured freshman curriculum kind of roadshows around the community. We are happy to continue this conversation, both this night and in nights down the road. So first of all, thank you all for coming out. For those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Greg Johnson. I'm the Associate Superintendent at the high school. And over here to my left, who's going to be co-presenting a number of slides and information tonight, is Dr. Lori Fiorenza, who is our Director of Student Learning. So let's see a little bit if we can get a feel for kind of who's in the crowd. So how many of you have been to one of the previous evenings when you've been out talking? I see a few hands. Single digits, maybe. So most of you are first-timers, and I would imagine that most of you, by a show of hands, are parents of students here at Percy Julie. Is that right? All right, good. So what we want to do, how many of you, of those of you who are first-timers here, have seen or, read the presentations we've had online, or have seen the video from September 18th? So just a few. Okay, all right. So I think what we're planning is going to hit the mark, right? So what we're going to do is to try to do a fairly abridged, or it'll be all the information we've shared before. Try to go through it as quickly as we can, and then open up the conversation for whatever questions you all have. And when we're done tonight, which is planned for right around 8:30, we'll certainly stay here and answer a few questions if folks have one-on-one questions there. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and get started with some of our information here. Let me say just a few things about myself first, so you kind of know my background just a little bit. This is my third year here working in this community. But I do want to also illustrate that my connections to this community, they kind of run deep and they run far back. I had both grandmothers are very linked to Oak Park. I've been in and around Oak Park River Forest my entire life. My grandmother graduated from the high school here back in 1937, and she lived here for quite a while. And so, as a little kid, I remember being part of this community quite a bit. And I also have kids who are in the high school right now. I have a freshman and a junior in the high school. So, of course I'm professionally invested in this work, but this is, of course, a personal investment as well. And I think you'll see that as we go through some of the slides and the information that we have here tonight. Okay? So, let's get started, all right? First, I want to put what we're doing here within the context of what we are and what we are trying to be as a school district, all right, in District 200. What you'll see up here is our mission and vision statement. I'm not going to read this to you. You can take a look at it up there, but here's why it's really important. Here's the message that I really want everybody kind of just to hold on to as we move through the rest of the presentation. We are doing everything we really can as a school district to make sure that these are not just words on a page. All right? We are working to live our mission and our vision at the school. We are looking to live what we want to be and make sure that the path we take to achieve that is part of our daily path within the school. And the key information here is that we know that we have a very real challenge in front of us to serve the needs of all of our students within that school. It's a challenge that historically we've missed the mark on, right? Like a lot of school districts around this country. It's something we've missed the mark on. And so it's time for us to really focus on that and take meaningful steps forward. And so let me begin by talking about what got us to this point right now, all right, in this community. First, a curriculum evaluation process, simple and straightforward. About a year ago right now, almost to the date, I presented to our Board of Education a formal curriculum evaluation process. This curriculum evaluation process was designed to focus on grade levels so that it would help to enhance an articulation between divisions within our high school. One of the bit of early feedbacks that we got during my first year at the high school, which again was 2 years ago, was that often kids felt very kind of burdened by the volume of homework that would come in peaks at different times throughout their weeks and their months, right? A ton of homework or a ton of tests are coming their way in multiple divisions at the same time, multiple courses at the same time. And so we wanted to make sure we talked about what really that meant for our kids as part of our evaluation process. And so we set up a 4-year cycle. This 4-year cycle was based off of first data review, which you see in the top left corner up here, all right? And if you want to take a little bit more thorough dive into what the data was that we looked at, you can take a look at the presentation from September. We took a look at data from a variety of sources to understand not only what our curriculum was, but what the outcomes are of it, and how our kids were actually experiencing it in the classroom. We went on a process of planning and professional development. So after that data review, the idea was that this year, in the second year of this process, we would go about a planning and professional development process. We would develop these thorough plans to figure out how we are going to make any changes we want out of the curriculum evaluation process come to life. Then the idea was this third year, in the bottom here, would be part of a piloting process. And if this was all we were talking about, a traditional curriculum evaluation process, in this case that was focusing on grade levels, we wouldn't be here tonight at Julian talking about these changes. This is a standard process that a lot of high schools, well, all high schools should, and a lot of high schools really do focus on. And the final step was that in the fourth year of the process, we would implement this new curriculum. Okay? And so, what has come out of this process this past school year were a lot of different recommendations. And these are, best evidence-based practices for students in schools that are designed to enhance the consistency and the quality of the curriculum that we're offering our students. And you can just see them up there. I won't read them all to you. But I wanted to highlight one thing before I click on to the next slide. And that is that we went throughout this entire process with an equity lens in mind, right? We were asking ourselves who our curriculum was and who our curriculum was not designed to really support and help. Not because we wanted to take something from some and give it to others, but because we wanted to make sure that our curriculum was authentically reaching all of our students. And we had to take a look at it in terms of how we are sorting our students. We wanted to take a look at it in terms of how we are looking at our content, the resources we're providing, the pedagogy we're providing our students, the assessments that we're using, all those things, right, that are linked to our curriculum. But as we take a look at it, and as we evaluated this curriculum, we began to see these themes. And we began to understand as we were talking with our division heads, and we look at the recommendations that our teacher teams were really bringing to us, that there was a structural element that was really at the heart of where we needed to go as a school district. And it's going to be illustrated by what we see in our next few slides here. First, we saw that there was a significant overlap between the performance of our students who were in our college prep courses and those students who were in our honors courses throughout their freshman year. That significant overlap caused us to take an extra step in the process. And that's what we see on these next two slides, right? Or these next 2 points on this slide. In order to ensure that all students have fair access to a curriculum that appropriately challenges them, we determined that curricular changes to freshman year were not enough. We had to take a structural step forward, right? Something that has to do with how we are sorting our students before they can even access that curriculum. That's the challenge that we took on. And you're going to see the evidence that led us largely in that direction in just a few moments here. And so this is why we're all here, right? What was that extra kind of structural step that we were putting in place? And it's this. Beginning with the 2021-22 school year, freshmen will no longer be separated into the traditional classes that we have of college, prep, and honors, but instead, all students will have a chance to earn honors credits through a common, rigorous, high-level curriculum for all students. And you can see the divisions that we're talking about on the right. I'll talk about math a little bit more here in just a moment. But I want to also point out that something that in our hurry, I think, in our zeal in some other conversations to really focus on what differentiation is. You're going to hear Dr. Frenza talk about that a little bit more later this evening. In our hurry to talk about these things, I think we have skipped over in some ways what's really highlighted on this slide. We haven't given it the weight it truly deserves. What we are really talking about here is not teaching to the middle, right? So that we have kind of an ignoring on either tail end of what you would see in on a normal distribution curve. Our focus here is to hold true to what a high-level rigorous curriculum really is for all of our students and find ways to differentiate and support students so that more and more and more students can access that high-level rigorous curriculum. That's really our focus as a school district, as you can see here, which has been a focus from the very beginning. So that's where we are right now. This is the what, right, that brings us all together for the conversation. So, as we were taking a look at some of the questions that were coming to us, some of the conversation points that were coming to us as a school district over the past several weeks when we began this conversation on September 18th. We began to find that there were a few key themes that we really wanted to make sure we spoke to in future conversations. And that's what you see listed here in these questions on this, what is this, the sixth slide, okay? Does the evidence really support the work, all right? What really are you doing here? And does the evidence that you've looked at as a school district support the course of action that you've identified? Even if it does support a course of action, does the evidence that you're taking a look at really support the course of action that you're moving toward? And then, of course, the really important question that we all have to ask ourselves is, what effect is this truly going to have on our students? We have a responsibility to define students as all of our students. We can't lose sight, of course, of the effect that all of this will have on individual students. We all think of our own kids. I have my kids in the school, right, like I said before. But of course we have a challenge to ask ourselves, what effect is this really doing for all students in our school system, in our community, those kids that we see throughout town, those kids that we watch when we come to various events that we have at the school. What quality curriculum are we providing for all of those students? That's a challenge that we really have for ourselves. So these are the themes that are coming our way. And what I want to do in these next few slides now, before I dive into them too much, is just pause for a second and to say that those first few slides are really just the introduction, right? That's what led us to this point, all right? That's the context for our work. The next few slides are going to explain kind of the causal link, right? They're going to explain what the evidence is in various ways that led us to the conclusion that we have focused on here. So let's take a look at the first one. Number one, our data told us right off the bat that there is a significant opportunity gap between our white students and our black and brown students when you look at enrollment in college prep and honors classes from the moment they enter the high school. This is consistent. It's over time. It is one of those things that is structured inequality, right? It is just simply there. We are at a point where we can talk about, we've heard, hey, wait a second, you know, that's across the board. We see that across the board in our society. True enough, but of course that doesn't absolve us from responsibility. So as a school district, when we see something like this, we have to say, okay, what are we going to do about this very real challenge that has nothing to do about the quality of education that we are providing? It has absolutely nothing to do with anything other than when they come to us, these are the courses that our students are enrolling in based off of what they see and the little bit of information we provide to families and our feeder districts before our kids get to us, okay? Last point I want to make on this slide before I go next is about the opportunity gap. I think it's really important that we talk about the opportunity gap as opposed to something along the lines of an achievement gap. And that's really something that I think is important for us. When we think about the achievement gap, it's really easy for us to focus on this idea that, well, look, again, it's not our issue, right? It's an achievement something. Individual kids experience learning in classrooms, and the outcomes of those learnings are based on those individual kids. It's just their individual achievement. And it's something that allowed us to think that the results of this problem lay outside our own efficacy. Well, that's not the case, right? We do have a lot of efficacy in what we produce as educators in our school systems, what you produce as parents with your kids. We know that. And so the opportunity gap asks ourselves the right questions. It asks ourselves, what opportunities are we structuring for our students as part of our system to help make them be as successful as possible within our schools? So that's the focus here. We see this consistent, insidious a gap in how students are enrolling in our honors and college prep courses along racial lines. And I'm going to illustrate this here. This is kind of an illustration of that point, all right, from last school year. And so what you see here, if you just take a look at this quickly, is the percentage of each demographic group and racial ethnicity group that you see here who has enrolled in honors courses over the past school year at OPRF, or the past 3 school years, excuse me, at OPRF. And what you see here is really something in the area of about a 30 to 20% gap for our Black, African American, and Latinx students. Okay? There's been little changes in this data over time. We can talk about that a little bit more. There's been little fluctuations in this data that may not be due to this thing or that thing we've done as a school. But without a doubt, the gap is persistent for us, okay? All right, so that's step one. That alone, right, doesn't say that our curriculum is to blame, necessarily, or doesn't really tell us much about exactly where to go as a school district. But now we have the second thing that begins to make our school district look just a little bit different, okay? The gap is growing while students are with us. From the moment they come to us, right, that gap in enrollment and that gap that we see from the outcomes of that enrollment, that gap in beginning to look at student results on the assessments that we give them, that gap is actually expanding over time. That we can't say is the fault of just how kids are kind of falling out in the course offerings that we bring us. That is the effect of what we are doing as a school district. That efficacy is on us. Some people have understandably said, and it's been a great point, they have said, wait a second. The gaps that you're talking about, the challenges that you're defining, Mr. Johnson, are really things that best need to be addressed when kids are much younger than the 14, 15-year-olds when they come to you freshman year. Yeah, it's true. There's a lot of research out there about that, right? From birth to 4 is really when the first stages of these gaps begin to develop. Not the purpose of this presentation, but that's true. We know that. We also know that they expand, right? And they exist throughout the early education years. That's true. That's something District 97 is keenly aware of and trying hard to focus on. That's certainly something that District 90 is aware of and trying really hard to focus on. And it's certainly something that we're focused on as a district. But our challenge is with our students in ninth grade when they come to us. What can we do? What are we really doing to cause this widening gap with our students? And if you want to take a look a little bit more at that information, you'll be able to see that in not only the presentation from the 18th, but also from September 18th, excuse me. But you'll be able to see more information if you go to our board presentation from last December, okay? But this information here begins to illustrate that a little bit as well. All right, 2 things on this slide. First, on the left, okay? These are the evidence-based reading and writing scores, or I should say not the scores, these are the growth that last year's sophomores saw from their freshman to their sophomore year while they were with us, right within our zone of influence as educators, right in the zone of what we have to own as a school district. And what you see is that, wonderfully, every single one of our racial ethnic groups, every single one of them, is hitting the expected growth. That's why all the scores are in green there. Every one of them is hitting expected growth as set by the College Board based off of their nationally normed data. And so to illustrate that a little bit more clearly, if I'm standing in your way, I'm sorry. But over here you have expected growth, 23.07. And as you go down here, you can see how our different demographic racial groups line up within that, okay? There aren't a whole lot of school districts, right, who can really say this is really what's happening across the board, especially districts that have the diversity that District 200 really has. We should feel very solid as a community that we are seeing this type of growth. If you look over here on the right, though, right, you see something a little bit different, right? You have over here the expected growth of 27.23. Overall, our students are hitting that target at 29.1. But when you take a look at our different groups of students, you begin to see that divide is there. All right, so that's one thing, right? Not all students are hitting that target. But up until this point, I've talked about this, at least in the last few moments, as a static number, right? This is just 21.6, 22.4, and so on down the road. What's really important is to think about how the growth rates for students based off of this are going to begin to do this in our school district over time. And that's exactly what you see. If you go back to that board report from December, you will see that when you're looking at the exact same group of students, freshman, sophomore, junior, to senior, when you're taking a look at the exact same group of kids, you begin to see that gap widen over time. All right? That's one thing that we definitely have to own as a school district. This is what we have to begin to challenge ourselves to address. And here's the final point for us. So maybe, okay, good. So that gap in enrollment exists. That growth is yours over time. But still, right, I'm not sure the solution really is right. Here's what we begin to see, too, number 3. There is a significant overlap in the scores that our students are showing who are enrolled in college prep and who are enrolled in honors courses. Significant overlap. To the tune that on the left here, the first bullet on the evidence-based reading and writing, 69% almost 70% of the kids who are enrolled in our college prep are performing, by the time they come to us, within the range that is set by our honor students, the range of scores that are set by our honor students. 69% of kids who are enrolled in college prep are performing within the range that are set by the bulk of our honor students. This is a very real wake-up call for us, all right? This is a very real wake-up call for us. And to expand this data a little bit further, on the right-hand side, what you can see is if you use the college readiness benchmark that is set by the PSAT, all right, to say that, okay, these kids have a very reasonable chance, right, of moving on to college. What you're really looking at here is 84% of our incoming kids are hitting that college readiness benchmark, right? Which means that they have a strong possibility of being successful when they move on to college years down the road. So then the question is, why do we see this pattern, right? Why do we see this pattern? Some people have said, and this is a good question, they've said, wait a second, so you might see this range, but maybe the reason in these enrollment patterns is really kind of baked down to how students are performing school, right? How kids are doing school, homework, studying, turning in all their work, doing well on their essays outside of class, things like that. Well, here's what we began to see. 69%, the 69% number that we're talking about speaks to 219 students using last year's data. 219 kids. 179 of those kids earned A's or B's in their college prep course. They're doing school, right? They're performing. And to racialize that number, 70 of those students, 70% of those students are Black or African-American, Black African-American or Latinx. This is where we begin to see that divide really spread for our students. This is baked into our structure as a school system. This is institutionalized racism in some ways, isn't it? This is how things begin to divide as a school system, but we have to tackle this. Take a look at the next slide. When you look at the 84%, maybe when you add in that next group of kids, what are we looking at? 317 students, you're adding about 100 more kids, 244 of these kids are earning A's or B's, and 111 of them, right, are Black or African American, Latinx. This is a challenge we gotta stare down again. So, that's our main argument here, right? We have this enrollment trend. That enrollment trend is defined largely by race and ethnicity. The gap is growing over time, which exacerbates the divide that we see by race and ethnicity. And there's a lot of overlap between kids who are doing school pretty well. All right? We have to ask ourselves, is this curriculum? Sure, absolutely. We need to look at good curriculum. Culture-responsive curriculum, we need to examine what we're giving our kids, how we're grouping our kids, the instructional methods we're using. But that's not enough, right? This is a structural problem, not solely a curriculum problem. So, research a little bit. I just have a few more slides before I pass it over here. First, what does the research tell us? I've had a lot of questions about this research. If I could, and actually, you know what, if we could, let's just hold the questions till the end, and then I'll get them all in.
I have a question about some of the data that a few slides before. I know you want to get on to the content, but I think it's helpful to understand how we've gotten here.
Yes, I totally agree. I totally agree. I want to keep this presentation, with all due respect, as consistent to how we've done some of the others. Okay. And so there will be time for those questions, okay? And I realize that's not an answer you'll like there, but I really want to make sure that we're getting the message out there as best we can. Okay?
Quick definition.
Please.
Because I don't have kids on here. Right?
Definition,
so
sure.
What's the difference between college prep and honors?
Oh, gosh, thank you. Wouldn't that be good? All right, college prep is, it's actually, I can even talk about how those enrollment trends stand out. So first of all, we have about 45% of our incoming class are enrolled in college prep classes. About 45% are enrolled in honors. And about 10% are enrolled in support classes, okay? Because of IEPs, 504s, or other specific needs that we're able to identify for our students. The difference between those two is that our college prep courses don't carry with them a weight in the students when you calculate their GPA. Whereas in our honors classes, they do carry that weight for their GPA. So it's an extra bump in how we calculate their GPA. And that gives them advantages when we calculate that GPA when kids transition out of college. Okay? Let me give, as far as what the research tells us on this, I'm going to say kind of two quick things, and I'll try to slide through this as quickly as I can. First, I've had a lot of questions that say, okay, good. we've seen some of the research you put up, Mr. Johnson, out there that you've used as a school district to help kind of explain what you're doing. And that's good, but there is a lot of other research out there, of course, that says, whoa, you know, detracking can be problematic. And this wasn't meant to be, in any ways, a breadth of the literature that's out there as far as detracking is concerned. This was literature that we turned to help us really understand, once we realize those problems that we see in the other data, what is the research really telling us about the problems and the advantages, right, of trying to shuffle and change the system that we currently have of tracking. And so what you see here is kind of the themes that we see up here. And I'm going to highlight two broad themes within that context. Number one, what we see really clearly is that detracking is nationally, we see it across the board, it is causing the types of gaps that I spoke to earlier, right? And particularly, tracking is problematic for students of color. That's the first thing. Number two that you see is detracking can be very problematic unless you are taking your time to do it effectively. And I hope what I can begin to do is point out the ways that we are listening to the literature and trying to do this effectively for all of our students in the community. Okay? Let me speak to this slide very quickly here. This is something that is useful for us as a school district, and I hope I can illustrate a little bit. I know it's a little bit further away, but I hope I can illustrate a little bit how we can point to strong leverage points in literature to inform us where to go as a school system. So if anybody's ever heard of John Hattie, he's this guy who has done these huge meta-analyses of educational research. And you can see in the bottom right here, right, we're talking about 1,400 meta-analyses, 80,000 studies, a huge number of students involved in these studies. And what he's able to say is, look, right, based off of controlled studies, right, where you have control groups and your experimental groups, he's able to illustrate, look, these types of strategies have a strong effect on producing quality student learning, okay? The number one thing at the very top of this is collective teacher efficacy. This is collective school belief, collective teacher beliefs that we can actually positively affect change for all of our students. This is a huge challenge for us, for any school district, right? Because it has such a positive effect on our students. To illustrate what that effect size really means, take a look at the bottom left here, and I'm going to pop up here for a second. He talks about effect size in terms of, 0.4 he's arguing is the type of effect size you would see if you want to see a year's worth of growth for a student based off of successful implementation of this strategy, okay? 0.4 is expected growth within a year. You're not accelerating growth, but this learning strategy is also not slowing growth down. If you see something less than that, you're beginning to kind of not show a year's worth of growth during that time. A negative number, of course, is regression. And anything above 0.4 is accelerating growth beyond what you would expect to see in a year. The type of growth that you could reasonably understand would begin to close some of the gaps that we're talking about. And you go through all these studies and what he's really showing with this, and you look for the practice that we're really talking about in large measure tonight. And you have ability grouping down here, 0.12, right? A practice that is pretty close to not having a significant effect on student growth as far as showing that it can move growth, move students a year's worth of growth in a year's worth of time. So it tells us a lot of other information about where we can go as a school district, and as we are beginning to take a look at the research and figure out where we're going to go, we're identifying these key strategies and telling ourselves, look, we really want to focus on these, tease out these studies, and use what we learn to help positively affect student achievement as best we can. Okay? A few more quick bits of information and data that I can share out. Number one, we've had a lot of questions about Evanston High School, right? Not too far to the north. Evanston High School is a school that back in 2011 did something pretty similar to what we have done as a school district, what we are trying to do as a school district. They detracked freshman year back in 2011, and what I can show here is some of the results, right, that they have found. I want to illustrate a few things. First, we're learning from Evanston, to be sure. We aren't doing this because of Evanston, right? This is something that we see from an analysis and an understanding of our own data. But we are, without a doubt, informed by Evanston's work. We need to be informed by our sister schools. And so a few things to point out. Number one, the percent of students in the top left on the ACT, back in 2001 through 2017, the ACT was the standard test that all juniors in the state of Illinois took. The percent of students earning a 24 or higher, it improved significantly from 11 to 15. The percent of students who were in an 24 or higher improved significantly during this window. The percent meeting exceeding state standards, you can see from the report card, improved during this exact same window. Okay? So it had a positive effect on student performance on the standard assessment that is used across the board at this time for the state. Okay? Take a look over here on the right. What you see here is AP data, our advanced placement data at Evanston. And what you see here is that in 2011, the year that they started this for that class, right, when the incoming freshmen were first in these kind of merged college prep and honors classes, you see 65% of the students were getting a 3 or higher, which is the entry level point to be eligible to earn honors credit based off of the advanced placement tests. 69% in 2012. What you begin to see in 2013 is the first group of kids coming through the system who are taking advanced placement classes as juniors. That when you had this big bubble of kids taking these tests. It's at 67%, 63%, and then after that what you see is a change really in what these scores really are. The percentage increased. There was a dip in 2016 to be sure, no growth is linear, but those numbers in the 70s are significant, suggesting that more students are benefiting from college-ready scores due to their high school education, positioning them in a better light to move on to successful post-secondary careers. A huge point for us to learn from as we move forward. And then on the bottom left, the National Merit semifinalists. These are not the same swath of students that we're talking about before. These are the kids who are achieving at the highest level, right? The highest level. And what you see here is that in 2011 and 12, before the DTRAC students were taking these assessments, what you really see is a number of about 12 out of the graduating classes were taking we're hitting this achievement. And as you move forward, the main illustration here is that you don't see significant drop-off with these scores, right? You don't see that drop-off. The highest achieving students were still achieving at very high levels, post-change, post-curricular change. Again, something for us to learn from. Let's take a look at some of those ancillary factors that go on in the school system, right? Not just those traditional scores. Let's take a look at the effect on graduation rates. From 2014 through 2018, the graduation rate is essentially a static figure. Peaks at 92%, but it goes from about 88% to 92%. The effect on dropout rates, we don't see a peak in dropout rates, right? Kids aren't fleeing the school because suddenly, oh my gosh, it's so hard. Right, you have 2014 to 2018. It's all right about there at 1%. The effect on enrollment, you don't have kids fleeing the school, right? You actually have an increase in students enrolled in the school, 3,100 to over 3,400. How about the effect on kids getting into college? Real lifetime applications, real benefits for students moving out of high school. And what you see is that in 2014, just before that first class graduated, you see 69%, and since then, it has never been less than 73%, all right? So you see real changes in their data that affect students' lives as a result of what they've done. Something for us to learn from. And the last thing I'm gonna say, I think, is the pilot page yours? I think it is, yes? The last thing that I'm gonna say is what we can learn from some of the potential pitfalls. I referenced those earlier when we take a look at the research. And this is a summary of a lot of what we begin to see out there in literature, things for us to truly be aware of, all right? And these are things that our teachers are asking about. This isn't just in the literature that you see listed, but also from what the conversations that we're having with other school districts and also internally, right? A fear that we're teaching to the middle, a fear that we need to make sure that we are attending to what essentially is classrooms that look a little bit different than they looked previously. There's a fear that we're going to revert back to old practices if we don't differentiate our instruction well. The idea that we'll kind of just detrack our regular classroom spaces, right? Go to some sort of de facto tracking model. A fear that we won't have quality support systems in place to allow all students to really access this high-level curriculum. And the last point is something that is so easy to do when you feel the urgency, right? Is to do something too soon. And so our challenge is to make sure that we are doing this smart, we are patient over time with our work. Okay. Okay? So with that said, I'm going to switch a little bit between kind of what got us to this point to really the part that Lori has picked up here, which is moving forward with the professional development and some of the kind of how the sausage is made with this work moving forward. This is something we're taking 2 years to figure out as we move forward. And so with that context, I'll pass it over. I don't know if your mic works or not. Oh, it does. It's all yours. Okay. And I'll go for it.
Okay, so before I begin, you've heard all about the data and how we've arrived at where we are. And if you're a parent like me, the bottom line that you really want to know is how is this going to impact and affect your student in the classroom? That's your priority, is your student in the classroom. So that's what I'm going to speak to, is what's going to take place in the classroom. I'm going to go through this in about 3 or 4 slides, and maybe I'll talk for 5 or less minutes. But I want you to know that we do acknowledge that this is not going to be as simple and as easy for our teachers as the couple of minutes I'm going to share these slides and tell you what's going to happen. Now, I'm telling you that not because I want you to think, aren't teachers already doing some of these things that you're talking about? And yes, they are. But what we are proposing is that this shift, this opportunity to let students, without a label, as a 9th grader, determine who they want to be, how they want to be learners, where they want to go with the rest of their high school career, and plan that out. We are going to have a deeper, broader toolbox, and that is what I'm going to share with you now. Is in order for us to do that, in order for us to begin to embark on this pilot opportunity next year, we're going to have to engage in lots of professional development. And professional development for an educator really is not learning something new all the time, though there are new aspects of curriculum, of instruction, of being a teacher that happen and shift all the time. Just like technology keeps changing as rapidly as it does, the way we teach, the way we have to engage our students changes, and so we have to learn and build new knowledge. We have to refine, or as some call sharpen the saw, right? So we have to always be willing to come back and learn more about what we already know. So we will be engaging our teachers in those opportunities, as well as some of their own action research, which is part of what this pilot is allowing teachers to do. It's allowing teachers to explore and learn things that are of interest to them as well. So the parameters of the pilot are incredibly important. So when we're talking about a pilot, we are talking about 1 unit per course. And so in a school, in your students' classes, they may go through a unit that is 3-4 weeks long. It covers one kind of themed subject, and it involves a number of skills. So this pilot that we're proposing in those courses at the 9th grade is 1 unit. So 1 3 to 4 week session in which they will teach to all students this rigorous opportunity, regardless of college prep or honors. The same pilot will be provided to both of those groups of students. So then you might say, well, how are you going to know if it works? How are you going to know if it was too easy for my honors student, but not hard enough for college prep? So we're going to use what's called a common assessment. And common assessments are basically, I'm going to give the same test over these skills to both groups of students. And then we're going to compare the data, the results, and find out, did both groups learn the skill that we needed them to learn? Did one group not learn something that the other group did? And we use that information to shift and change our instructional practices, how we teach kids over and over. So that's kind of the meat of the pilot. 1 unit, a minimum of 1 unit, common assessments, common formative assessments. So that's, as the teacher's moving through the week, they're checking in with students. They're doing quick checks to see if kids are getting it. All of that data will be utilized for us to determine, was this effective for both of the groups? It will not. It will involve teachers that have been part of that curriculum writing process. So they are invested in this process. But it will also be expanded to teachers who may just want to join, just to give it a try. And we have had teachers that have already said, yes, I'm interested in trying this pilot as well. So they are very, very excited about this. So here are some of the things that as we embark on this process that we know already that we're going to need our teachers to learn at a deeper level or expand their knowledge. So classroom environment as far as structures and supports. So of course, as we have a new group of students kind of mingling together, we're going to want to think about, learn about, and have lots of conversation about how are we setting up our structures to ensure that all of our students are successful. And sometimes when we think about, this new group of students coming in, we're thinking of the way high and the way low. But that's really not what we're talking about as you merge a college prep and an honors class. You aren't talking about, someone who's way down here struggling to read and someone who's here reading at the collegiate level. So we have to kind of narrow our perspective. And when you think like that, it makes you a little nervous that your student who does read at the collegiate level could be sitting in the same space as a student that can't read, and that's not the case. And so we will be talking, though, about how will we support our students who might learn differently, who might struggle with one particular skill set or another. Culturally relevant curriculum, we are absolutely looking at how to deepen our knowledge about ensuring that kids can see themselves reflected back in the curriculum, that they can see themselves in the novels that they read, in the kind of writing that they do. It is very important that all of our students can see themselves and their culture and community reflected in what they're doing at the school. Content-specific learning. So math teachers need to learn new strategies for teaching math. Writing, English teachers need to learn new strategies. Technology, science is ever-changing, constantly moving and evolving. So the teachers will be engaged in content-specific work. Evidence-based practices like scaffolding. So how do I take a skill over here and incrementally get all students to move along a path of learning and understanding? And then some instructional practices, such as differentiation. So when we talk about differentiation, what we are talking about is how I support a student in their learning when your way of learning and my way of learning are very different. And I understand that when you talk about merging college prep and honors, some people, again, go back to the very high and the very low, the very fast learner and the very slow learner. But that's not necessarily what we're talking about when we speak about differentiation. So in any class, Calc BC, you always have students who can learn a skill set differently than someone else, even in Calc BC. I might be able to master the equation very quickly, but struggle to graph it. Whereas my partner in Calc BC it might come very easy, that way of graphing versus learning this equation, how to use it. So in all of our classes, college prep, honors, transitional classes, they all have to differentiate. So this is not a new concept. We are just now going to have to expand how we do it so that we are more efficient. We are going to change how we engage kids, right? It might not always be where I stand and deliver in the classroom. We might use things like personalized learning or Genius Hour or other ways of engaging kids in their learning, and that could be differentiated. Our assessments, that's the product kids produce. We can differentiate that. That doesn't have to be a multiple choice test. It doesn't have to be a 3-page written essay. We can change how they produce the evidence of their knowledge. We can do that in a lot of different ways. And so giving teachers even more tools to find out what kids know is incredibly important. Could you go to the next slide? So this is kind of a roadmap that we use with the teachers that is really very good at explaining the process of differentiation. So you're not thinking that I have 28 kids in the room, and so I have to do something different with every single student to create a separate lesson for every student, and that's not the case. So we start out with defining the learning targets, defining what we want kids to know, the skills that we want kids to know. Our teachers are already doing that. They already know the skills that they want kids to know. As they're thinking about this pilot and merging a college prep and an honors, they are thinking, what are the high-level skill sets that we want kids to be able to reach? All kids sitting in this college prep honors merge eventually. Then you're going to look at, how do I engage the kids? How do I get them interested? That's what good teachers do. All good teachers, right? So then we move to assessing students. We're going to assess students, it's called pre-assess. So we're going to figure out where they are with that specific skill. So your test score on the PSAT isn't going to define how you can do in a math class. How you pre-assess, how you assess on this skill is going to determine where I go with you for this particular skill. Then once I know where each student is, I'm going to group them accordingly for that specific skill. So learning is not static, it's fluid. So for this particular skill, I may be way advanced and over here with this group. But in the next set of skills, I may be right here, just kind of getting it, but need a little support. So it's fluid. I don't always have to be way over here, and that really isn't how our kids are. Once I have all of that groupings together, now I'm going to really focus on getting the student's voice into the plan, into the equation. So I'm going to sit down with students and set goals. Now, this looks like, what do you see your strengths, you see where you're struggling, or you see where you have some areas that could improve. What do you want to work on with this particular writing piece? I know many of you have possibly either been part of or have heard about student-led conferences. It's very much like the same thing, where your student might sit in front of you or in front of the teacher and talk collaboratively about, this is what I'm really good at. I can really do this well. Here's where I'm not doing this really well, but I really want to. I want to master this skill set. So the teacher is going to be working with the student on that conversation, co-doing this together, collaborating. At that point, once the teacher knows what the student's focus is, what their goal is, the teacher can begin to differentiate either the process, the product, how the student is engaged. All kinds of things can shift and change with the sole purpose of helping the student arrive at mastery of the skill and achieving their goal. The teacher is monitoring this through what's called formative assessments. It's those little checks. I walk around, I'm talking to the student, I might give something at the end of the class, a tiny little quiz or something of that nature, homework, to see where the student is. And then, depending on how the student does, if the student has mastered it, great, we're going to go on to the next thing. If the student has, we're going to go back up to the goal setting, and we're going to have another conversation as a teacher with that student about, well, where is your strength? Where did you fall short? What do you need to improve? What do you need from me? What support? What resources? And the teacher is going to begin to work through that process over and over. Learning is fluid, not static. So it's no longer, I sit and give you the information and you repeat it back to me. This is the learning process. I don't remember if we did this. I don't remember at this point if we did this. So I think really what we want to say through this slide is that we are going to be evaluating ourselves as well, kind of using the same process that we just walked through. So as teachers are completing these assessments, we are going to be evaluating where are we being really successful? Where are we really strong? Where are the areas that we need more support or more resources or more PD? And we're going to be responsive to what we are seeing based on the data. We also have the internal program evaluation that we engage in on a yearly basis. We're going to continue to do this in all of our grade levels. It is the right thing to do so that we can make sure that students are learning the skills that they need to learn regardless of where they end up in the next years. The research partnership.
Yeah, the last thing up there is that we are in the process of we have reached out to various institutions for their support, right, to be external evaluating partners in how this rolls out in the coming years. And we'll be able to share more about that as we make those details more concrete. So with that said, today's our date. And we will have future conversations, to be sure. So what I'd like to do right now is open it up to whatever questions folks have at a variety of points. Again, I don't know what time it is, but for whatever we have until at least 8:30, we'll have the conversations, and then we'll be here after that as well for one-on-one conversations, whatever is possible. And so without further ado, yeah, you want to walk around with your mic? Let's open this up, and let's start over here to my right, if I can, if that's fair. Should I go back to a slide specifically?
I think it would be great to go back to the difference between college prep and honors, even before that. So the 31% is actually, it's 31 percentage points, is that correct? So it's not just there's 31% more whites in those classes, but it's actually 31 percentage points, which is quite a bit more significant.
It's a gap, yeah. So what I'm saying here is
Repeat the question?
Yes, I'll repeat the.
I was going to, I just used talking, so I might be rude.
I said it's important to note that the 31% is points, not just a percentage. So the number of African American and Hispanic students is considerably less than white students in these. And my point is, and I don't know how long we've been using the Explorer test, or I have 2 kids who've now gone through OPRF. I have one coming up this year, and she's taking the PSAT this Saturday, much to my chagrin, that it's a calcified system. And D200, D97, and I'm sure D90 don't talk to one another about these issues. And I guess they have been in place for years. And my question is, I love this idea. I think it's terrific. I want to know, and I love the fact that we're going to have professional development, but how are we going to bridge the gap so that administrators and teachers are communicating to one another across the school districts to make it a fluid system?
Thank you for the question. You're right in your explanation of the percentages, so thank you for that. And communication between districts is a sore need. It might relieve you to know one thing there, that before we even went this route and we discussed this with our division heads and our teachers, after the evaluation process, we already had those exact recommendations coming from our course teams, saying that we need better curricular articulation, even at the curricular level, right? Not just about how we use systems like this, but even at the curricular level, between math and English and history and so on, we need that vertical articulation in a much more robust way than we currently have. We have put that, we've had already preliminary conversations between 97 and 90 about that need. And so as we begin the next 2 years of planning work, that's on our radar as something we absolutely focus on. That's one thing. The next thing I'll say is that data sharing between the districts is really a huge part of your question as well. What data are we sharing, and how aware are we of how that is and really kind of should be used, right? And so we have, over the last year and a half, actually ever since really, well, it goes further back than that, but we had a big kind of tri-board meeting back in January in which that topic was addressed head on. And so we are working really hard to make sure that both districts, all 3 districts, are fully aware of what data we need to share and use between one another, between each other, so that we can make really good decisions between our kids. That's another level of collaboration that I can speak to there. So those, you're right that those are big points, but we have work to do, right, to make that level of collaboration fully meaningful for our kids. I want to say one last point about how tests are used on this point, because it might go to a question that's already out there. I don't want, based off of the information we've just heard, to have the impression, I don't want you to have the impression, that we are taking the PSAT scores. Now it's PSAT, it's no longer Explorer, but it's used in very similar ways. We actually, for an interim period there, had used STAR assessments, which are more kind of, they're more used as assessment tools for learning decisions in classrooms than the PSAT and the Explorer test really have been. But we're using the PSAT now, so we have even data points over time because it's a test that matters for kids. But we aren't taking that PSAT, those test scores, and then just saying, here's your course for kids. We are not doing that. In fact, part of what I think we begin to see here and you're talking about just a few kids that show this jump between 11.3 and 20.6. I mean, it's just a very small number of students. But when you see this jump here, part of what we think we don't know, 1 year does not make a trend, but part of what we think that change might be due to is the fact that we stopped the practice of saying, here is your recommended course. We told kids, look, here are your scores, here are the range of courses that seem to make sense for you. Make a choice, parents and kids, based off of your interests, your knowledge of who you are as learners, where your concepts of kind of future growth. Make a choice for the courses that are going to be best for you. And we saw a bit of a boost there. So that's one data point. But anyway, I want to make clear we're not using those as kind of black and white decision-making tools.
Why exclude math?
Yes.
And secondly, can you expand on what 1 unit per course is? I didn't get that.
Yeah.
So why
You want to do the second first?
I can. So a unit is, as I said, kind of like a theme around a skill set. So for example, in biology, we might be learning about photosynthesis, and that unit could take about 3 weeks. And there are different lessons in that unit, different assessments in that unit, but it's all around photosynthesis. And so teachers will be piloting at least a minimum of 1 unit such as that over the course of several weeks in both the honors and the college prep courses next year, along with a common assessment, which means a test that is the same, whether that's multiple choice, whether that's a portfolio type thing. It's going to be up to the teachers to determine that, but there'll be consistency across all of the classes so that they're doing the same thing, and we can extrapolate that data and make certain that kids are learning at the level that we expect.
And are they going to have an option? I'm sorry. Are they going to have the option of earning honors credit in that unit?
So
The question was about options of earning honors credit in that unit.
right. So in the honors class, they will continue to do whatever they have previously done to get that honors credit. In that one particular unit, it's just going to be a unit. There's not going to be, the teacher could choose to add 1 or 2 questions to make it more challenging, more rigorous. But the idea that we need, the information that we must extrapolate is the high-level curriculum, the high-level unit, is it meeting the need of our honor student and our college prep student? Does that make sense? We want to see that they both can do this, so to speak.
When they're doing models, they will be able to try to do more for honors credit. Is that right? Sorry, I'm confused about it. Because I thought that this is a test to find out how it works.
Okay, can we answer that gentleman's
There's gonna be a lot of-
other question, and then I'll come back to this?
Let me go to math really quick here, okay? So why not math? After all, let me go to that slide. Math illustrates in some ways, well, in a lot of ways, right, a more glaring need for us institutionally. We aren't turning a blind eye to math. We went through a really robust curriculum evaluation process, but we have a challenge, and this shows in some ways that we aren't blindly saying one solution fits all across the board with kind of blunt instruments. Students who come to us from math are more kind of tracked. They are more sorted than any other discipline. Students were sorted into 10 different math classes at OPRF last school year. Deciding that, okay, we're going to get 90% of our students into one in 1 year doesn't make a whole lot of sense for us, right? We have curricular challenges, especially when a lot of the research out there about math curriculum tells us 2 things. It tells us, number one, especially in this country, we are training our kids to be excellent proceduralists. We teach math, they learn it by rote, and they execute it via memorization, right? We need to really think about our math curriculum so that it does the second thing I'm talking about, disrupts that proceduralist way of thinking about math, not at the expense of kind of destroying it, but also enhances the relevancy of a math curriculum so that students can understand its immediate application to real-world concepts. So you have 2 things to challenge here with math, right? 2 things to challenge here with math. And we know that takes a significant curricular level of work. That is a type of work that you would do for a regular curriculum evaluation process. And so that's really why math can't be immediately, looked at in this exact same light. It doesn't work. We have a lot of curricular work to do with math to make sure that it's what we're providing and how we're educating our students is accessible for all of our students, which is the key goal. Okay? So.
Okay, just let me clarify the honors portion before we ask any more questions. So next year when we pilot, we are piloting a unit. It will not have implications to whether or not a student is in honors or whether or not a student is in college prep. So they will continue to earn honors the same way. The following year, when it is in implementation stage, yes, they will earn honors. And that's a whole nother layer. They will have the option to earn honors. So if I am in 9th grade English, which let's just say that's what we're gonna call it. I don't know if we haven't named it yet. 9th grade English. Everybody's gonna get the same rigorous curriculum. We have piloted it, we've made adjustments, we're now delivering it. Students will have the option to earn honors credit by doing a variety of tasks that we will outline. And our plan is to outline it and to be very clear across all of the divisions that it is similar. It may not be the same exact tasks, but that it is similar so that as a parent, you're not guessing between classes. Well, what is it going to look like here? What are you going to need to do to earn honors here? It will be clearer because it will be a level of consistency, systemic.
We have a question up here in the front here.
Yeah, so I'm assuming that the end game is that, because all you're talking about here is college, not vocational, anything like that. I'm assuming that the end game is that these students go on to not only go to college, but complete college. And full disclosure, I just read an article last night about New Orleans Science East where like 90% of the kids went on to college. And by Department of Education guidelines, around 10% had actually graduated. Last week, a question was asked in the audience, or a comment was made about these are kids, many of these kids don't have their basic needs met. And the response was more academic. And I think what the woman meant was that basic needs like food, shelter, a stable family life, when they talked to these kids after they dropped out of college, they were having problems with money, they were having problems with family, there were all kinds of things. And the school, in a sense, made the teachers accountable for their success after high school. So I'd like you to respond to all the different things that are outside of high school that affect your success.
Yeah. Let me begin my response by thank you for that. I think you're spot on with what you're describing as a very real challenge for our students in high school, not just post-secondary, of course, right? That's a challenge for human beings. But I want to challenge your assumption a little bit at the very beginning. We are talking about college prep and honors right now because we are talking about there's 2 courses in which 90% of our students are sorted into right now for the vast majority of our curricular offerings, especially our core courses. But we are fully aware that there is a significant need for us as a school system to focus on post-secondary experiences for our students that are well beyond merely the absolute path of, yes, college success. College success is incredibly important. But just a year ago, actually it was last spring, our Board of Education approved a post-secondary pathway coordinator whose job is set up this year and beyond to define college pathways, specifically college pathways beyond and different than what you traditionally see the 4-year college pathway being. So that we can advertise and make it very clear to our students, help them engage into real-world experiences from the second they are in high school. That's valuable for students in all sorts of ways, even if they do go on to a 4-year school. But of course, it's incredibly valuable for kids as they make transitions into, and in many cases, into the workforce or trade schools or things like that when they leave high school. So we don't have a blind eye to that. That's really important. As far as social and emotional support goes, and making sure that we understand that we have fully, rounded human beings who are nurturing along our path and who are going to graduate from high school and move on. That's a huge challenge of ours as well. And I'm not going to dive into it in great detail right now, but we have a strategic plan that is focused on developing the supportive learning environments that we have in the school, and is designed on focusing on holistic learning environment for all of our kids. Both concepts. And you can take a look at our website, we can talk later, and I can break that part of the plan down. But again, with that point, we don't have a blind eye on that either. We're really trying to focus on that as much as we can too. So thanks for the question.
You mentioned that not all teachers would be involved in the pilot experience. I'm wondering what percentage of teachers will be involved in that, and whether or not the successes or failures of the pilot year will be shared with the community.
Sure. Laura, do you want to talk at the beginning of this?
Absolutely. So we are looking at approximately, I'm going to go to this gentleman next, and then we'll come over here. We are looking at approximately 5 to 6 teachers in each one of the divisions that are on the writing committee, and depending on the FTE, as long as they're teaching that 9th grade course and we don't have to shift, they will be doing the pilot, and then any teachers that want to join.
How many teachers are there? I don't have a frame of reference for 5.
It could be different in each division, right? So in English, it might be, I think it's 20. So if you have 5, 6, 7 teachers doing this, it's a nice chunk. In math, it's 7, did she tell me 17 today?
17 teachers teaching Algebra 1.
17.
Or, I'm sorry, 17 sections of Algebra 1, excuse me.
So each, I don't have them all memorized, and I would hate to mislead you. I do think that the purpose of the pilot would be to come back and share what we've learned, share the successes and the places that we're still challenged, and transparency, of course. I think that's reasonable.
Okay.
So the slide about Evanston Township, which I think is an interesting comparable for us in a lot of different ways. Do you have the data for this broken down by race and ethnicity so we can talk about how any of this is actually helping equity?
Yeah, there's a lot of data on, there's 2 ways you can go, all right? You can take a look at some of this data is broken down by race when you get it off the school report card, but the school report card doesn't break down all of its data by race and ethnicity. I actually had a meeting, though, with Dr. Pruitt-Adams was that yesterday? It was yesterday, with the administration over at Evanston. And we sat down and we talked about a lot of their data, and we do have more information than what you can get in the state report card that begins to break that down. Again, we just got it yesterday, but we anticipate sharing that out in future conversations as well. You do see, I'll tell you one thing that was really clear in the data. The percentage of their Black African American students who are participating in the AP program and getting 3s or higher, you can see on a significant increase over time at the school, and I can share that out. And so what you're really seeing here is students who are walking out of the school with better currency, right, to get into and evidence that they can succeed in the rigors of a post-secondary world. Even if these students had all those skills anyway, right, the fact that they're walking out with that currency is a confidence booster, right, for them. And so that alone is success. And I'm not even talking about defending in terms of the content of the course. But yes, that data is there, and we will be sharing that out. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for that.
Your little report here says currently we rely heavily on standardized test scores, and using such limited data with students as learners, doesn't really go as you'd like it to work. Which we're talking about before this, between the grammar schools and high schools and sharing. You have the 69% up there, which means you really have about 300, you have another 100 that are not included in the 219 of that 69%. You got about 300 students, you got about 80 or 90 in there that are troublesome. What I'm asking you, and I used to work in the high school about 5 years ago, 25 years ago. Now I've been in Irving School for 25 years. Is if you've got a 5th grade reader in high school and you have 110 of them, which would maybe be about the number, and you put them in this program that you've got, and you've seen America and me and all the rest of the stuff and what a kid can do to a teacher, one student to the whole room, whereas if you took those children, kept the program you've got, add the 170 that get A's and B's into the program that you're already doing but improving on, and then take these young children, many of them very good children that have a real trouble learning, and they don't happen to be handicapped in any sort of way. But what they really need is some tender, loving care. And if you throw them into this class, they're going to fail, and they're going to fail big, and they become, when they're nice and kind in grammar school, and I do it every day, they become a little bit angry when they get to college and find out that They can't compete. It really hurts them, and you lose them. I mean, and you can lose them forever.
Great. Let me respond first to that. So, did everybody get the question? Okay. Let me say this first. You know, we have kids now, right? Of course, who are angry, who are frustrated, who walk into the school, they look around, and they have this sense that these higher learning experiences aren't for them. Of course, kids tell us this. We did focus groups of a huge number of students last year across our divisions when we did our curriculum evaluation. That was a theme that clearly came out. And that population that we're talking is more often than not a very racialized population, right? So that's a phenomenon in our school right now. Part of what we're trying to do is make it clear that these advanced learning spaces are available for a huge number of our students, more than we currently have right now. But you do bring a good point out in the sense that we are talking about, in some cases here, some students who really do struggle in some ways to get academic access to high-level learning experiences for reasons that we are able to point to pretty specifically. A few things to say about that. Number one, we have an impressive student support system that has been built up over the past few years with our MTSS coordinator, Kristen McKee. We presented that to our Board of Education last spring, okay? And you can see the growth that our students are showing in that. So one thing we do know how to do as a school district is support students in reading and math who are below grade levels, and support them not just the point that they can grow, but support them to the point they are gaining on their peers. They are closing the gap that they see. That's one. But number two, I also want to point out that a lot of students, not all the students who are evidenced in that data, some of those students are in the kind of 10 to 15%, about 10% usually, who aren't going to be in this combined college hours. They're in a support class for one reason or another. One of the things that we knew, and we got a little bit more information on yesterday from Evanston, and we are doing school visits to get even more information around, is how we can build a structured layer support system for our students so that we are giving them the supports they need to access the curriculum that we're providing them. And this can look in different ways. This can be simply tutoring work with a teacher outside of the class that is flexible based off of a specific need in different discipline. Sometimes this can be a full-fledged course that they're taking that is a targeted support based on identifiable needs. This is also why we are not making the mistakes of rolling this out next year. We're building a flexible support system to get students so that they can access this. And if we do have students who are at a point where, look, I mean, the reading level in this class is simply one that they cannot access, then what we have to build, and what we learned a little bit about yesterday, is there is a support class that's going to be distinct from this course for a little while, but not distinct to the point that there is no ramp that we are purposely building in to get them from college prep, or whatever this other experience might be, right, to the course that we're talking about right now. The mistake that schools always make is as soon as they say, we're going to support this other group over here, it becomes kind of just the ride that they have for the next 3 years. Our job is to make sure that we build this with the curriculum we're talking about right now, with this ramp in place, and so we're checking on points along to say, is this a good point for transition? Are we ready for a transition? Are we ready for a transition? And again, what is that going to look like exactly in our school system and our structure? Can't tell you. 2 years, right? That's why we need 2 years. Yeah, you have somebody?
You can go first.
So I think this is a great idea theoretically, and I am excited about it. I have to say I've talked to a couple teachers at OPRF, and my concern is that I'm a little worried that it's going a little bit too quickly, and that they're not going to have time to get an appropriate curriculum in place that will give the opportunity to earn honors as well as to have the rigorous curriculum potentially without honors. And how are you going to provide the time for the teachers to be able to develop this curriculum?
So we are working really closely with division heads, with instructional coaches, and with our TCT, which is our curriculum teams. They're the leadership there. I don't want to use too much teacher jargon, but it's kind of, they get together in a meeting and they look at their curriculum on the Late Start Wednesdays. So those groups and I are having lots of conversation. The time that they are allotted to do this work is going to have to be very strategic. We have to have a very solid plan in place. So Mr. Johnson and myself, in collaboration with those groups, are laying out an in black and white full plan that includes the PD template laid over it. When are we going to do this work? Our teachers work very, very hard. They give up their lunches, they give up their summers, and so we are having conversations about what additional spaces can we put these things in place so that teachers aren't always giving up their lunches, so they're not always giving up their summers. That really is very important to us, that we have a space, and so we do have to look at our structure. We do have to talk about how our meetings are laid out so that we can utilize them in the best fashion. I have shared with them some of our ideas and some of our plans, and they are very pleased with them. They think that they will work. It's going to take some time. We have 2 years, and that really is a long time. If we plan correctly, if we are systematic, if we are not haphazard, and by no means are we. This is very well laid out. We're going to be allowing teachers an opportunity to look at PD options on October 16th, and then in November we are rolling out this full plan for them that includes the PD. So I feel like we're ahead of the game. We're ready to.
What's PD?
I apologize. Professional jargon, professional development. And so we're going to get at that a lot of different ways. Teachers can learn these things. And some of the departments have actually come to me and said, well, can we do more than one unit? Because we're really ready. So we have to kind of ebb and flow with who our teachers are. If a department is ready to do more, I don't want to hold them back, right? I have to be the same kind of leader for them that we want for them to be with our kids. So I'm trying to differentiate my approach with them. So if this group is ready to go with 2 or 3 units, great, you should do that. If this team is only going to do 2, that's great. We're just setting kind of some boundaries that we need at least this much. We need at least this many common assessments, and then letting them have some autonomy within that. Okay, I'm going to these ladies here. I told him I was coming to him right after this lady. Oh, he's going. You going to the lady? Oh, fabulous. Okay, I'm gonna. Oh, I maybe have to talk.
So with the pilot program, with the assessments, are the advanced or the honors class and the college prep class, if they have the same amount of time per unit? So if the photosynthesis unit is 3 weeks in a college prep class, is it going to be 3 weeks in an honors class?
That's a really good question. So I would say yes, that you have to have, it has to be the same, right? Otherwise, we're not comparing apples to apples. But what I will say is, as the teachers are shoring up their curriculum even further out, we do want there to be some ability for teachers to be responsive to kids. So if we've taught this lesson on an aspect of photosynthesis, we've done a little lab, we give a formative assessment. I had them go home and answer 5 questions. And we as teachers sit down and we look at their 5 question responses, and 15 of the 30 kids didn't get it. Well, it doesn't make sense for me to just, oh, well, 15 didn't get it, let's keep moving. I might have to do something different. I might have to differentiate. I might have to say to this group, here's the lab I want you to start while I quickly reteach them this piece.
So then that leads into my second question, which once the pilot program is over, when you have, let's say, a 50-50 break of students that have mastered and 50% that haven't, do you move forward with the 50% that know? Or do you wait or slow the class down to help the kids that aren't there? Or do you end up teaching 2 different lessons and having 2 different groups, essentially 2 different classes going on within the same class?
So those are really, really good questions. And what I would say is there are a lot of things that can be done. Slowing down the class is not what we would want to do. So that's where you differentiate. That's where you might say, okay, I'm going to get this group of students started on this task, or this piece, or this writing, and I'm going to work with this group of students. Or there are multiple teachers teaching the same thing.
Right, but then you said with it being fluid, if you're moving certain kids on to the next lesson, and you're doing each
No, I didn't say a
determine
different
what
lesson. I didn't say a different lesson, because if these kids have mastered a skill, I could extend, see, and that's something that we don't often do, is when I have kids that get it, they just sit and wait for the kids that are needing a little more. But I can extend them, I can challenge them even more. I don't have to just, here, repeat this, right? I can extend them. That's what we should be doing. I know I'm making it sound.
Isn't that what tracks are all about? That you have the people that are moving along slower, have their own class and move at their own pace, and the people that are more successful or move fast. Because right now, the honors classes, what was left out of the difference between honors classes and college prep is that they move faster on the topics, they cover more material, and the discussion is more rigorous. That's the whole point of tracks, that you don't have to sit with a whole bunch of people and decide whether you're going to slow down.
Actually, sir, I'll tell you, I think we have some evidence that tells us one of the whole points of tracks is that they put some students in a finite path that is correlated with poor outcomes in other students. And what we're trying to do is upset that.
I am going to ask.
You're really different.
I'm going to ask that if you have a question, that because there are some people whose hands have been up, sir, that you allow them to get their question in, and they will come to you and let them get through that process. I do also want to add that, if I can.
Of course you can.
That
You want to give her the mic?
yes. When teachers are teaching, in the course of a sequence of lessons, quite often there are overlap in skills. And so I don't want you to think that one skill is isolated to one subject, to this lesson, to this unit. And so if there's a kid who didn't get it here, our teachers are well versed enough that they would say, okay, where are we going to repeat that skill to build upon it? They can also give additional support before and after school to also enhance those skills. But I don't want anyone to leave the room thinking that once you teach this skill in this lesson, it's done. That's the part of when Mr. Johnson spoke earlier about that articulation, the vertical and horizontal articulation is key in our coursework.
Can I just say real quick, for those of you who don't know, our superintendent, Dr. Godez. Yeah, there we go. Thank you so much. I have a question right here.
Before I move on to this gentleman
and then we'll come back.
Ask, yes. It is, remember I shared that it's not, it just left me like that fast, it's gone. But it's skill based. So it's fluid. Like kids aren't just, I'm really good, and it's fluid, it's not static. So I might have just missed this little piece of how to do this equation, but I still get it. I just might have missed this. Do you see what I'm saying? So it's not as cut and dry as we're making it sound right here.
I do have a question, but I want to make an observation first. I know I'm very proud of a process this district has finally undertaken. I've been in the district for 42 years. They are going about it the way change should come about. This dialogue with all the contentious points of view is healthy, and it will continue. We have a growth mindset in District 200 now. It's a great thing to see, that we don't have to sit and accept what we've accepted for generations. One other point. How many people think there might be some correlation between socioeconomic status of a child and success on achievement tests, etc.? Would you raise your hands, please? So here's a piece of information that hasn't been shared. And we're not trying to duplicate Evanston. I worked on a strategic plan, and I observed this process. Evanston has twice low income and poverty as District 200. We're at about 19%. They're at about 40%. They're under great pressure to change things up there. Not everybody agreed. Not all teachers agree with this. But the teachers are driving this in cooperation with the community. So my question is this. The evaluation is so important. We really got to think seriously how we're going to do it. And will you do both quantitative, meaning scores and results, as well as the quality of the experience children have? Especially the idea of having these multiracial classrooms that are a new dynamic for many of our children.
Sure.
Thank you.
In short answer, yes. And I'll just say quickly, we did that in our evaluation process up to this point. Talking to students, focus groups, looking at quantitative data. And I broke that down a little bit more thoroughly, and you can see that on our website for the presentation on the 18th, what we did. And we continue to plan that as we move forward. I have a question right here that we've committed to, and then we'll, after that, immediately go over here, okay? Thank you.
Okay. One of the slides addressed one of the pitfalls being constantly moving too fast with us. Okay, so now jump forward to the pilot here. We're talking about this piloting these units. And you said maybe 5 or 6 teachers for each unit. Are we getting a big enough of an N or a sample size to truly get out significantly, appropriately significant results that we're going to honest with ourselves? Are these really results that we're going to have?
Yeah, and that's a really, really good question. And I gave you a baseline minimum statement. It's just baseline. I don't know all the teachers that will be teaching 9th grade English next year. So to say who it is hard for me.
Because you really think you're going to get those results with 1 year of piloting as opposed to maybe you need a 2-year pilot to really get a good base number to get a significantly, statistically significant result.
Can I add, I'm sure there's a lot, that we've shared here that we're kind of filtering, but I don't want you to hold on to the idea that the pilot is the only way that we're learning how to do this work well next year, right? Pilot is...
That's your basis of whether it's successful or not for the pilot year.
Yeah, well, we are going to learn from the pilot, but I want to be also clear about where we are, right? The pilot is for us to figure out in practice with some of the assessment, grading, curricular, instructional strategies that we want to put in place. But based off of what we see here, we do believe, right, that combining these classes is the path to go. There's no doubt about that. We do know, and we see this in literature, we do know that we have to shore up our capacities and make some of those skills and those teaching skills more systemic across the board. We're going to use the pilots as a way to target some of those specific practices and learn from those, but we're doing PD, curriculum writing, workshops that are all going to be adding to that as well. And so what we hope to learn from our pilots is how we will shape this over time, but the idea of backing away from providing greater access to students to the level of rigor that we see in our honors courses is something that we are not willing to turn away from, right? We do want to see that.
Yeah, I get that. It's just a matter of, is there going to be enough feedback to let you know if the way you're doing it is really it's going to be an effective way to do it? Or do you need more time to put in those effective practices?
So I guess I just have to say, I don't know that I have an answer for that. I just have to be honest. I think we have to get in it. We have to watch the pilot and we have to listen and talk to our teachers, and I am listening and talking to them all the time. Almost every day I have a meeting with a group of teachers. And so I know that you like it hard and fast. Maybe if I'm sitting in your seat, I want one too. But I really want to be honest. No, I think we have to be responsive. So we're going to get the data, we're going to look at it, we're going to talk about it, and then we're going to go from there. But what I can tell you is the teachers are excited to do this. Maybe not all 287, but they are. Okay, right here. Sorry.
But that's 2 more questions.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
it's 8:30,
then we'll stay here
and we're going to be here, no doubt.
So I just wanted to make a point. I have 2 students who graduated from high school in the last couple of years. I have one there. All 3 of them have taken a combination of honors and college prep classes. And the differentiation that Dr. Fiorenza and Mr. Johnson have talked about occurs already. In both college prep and honors classes, when a unit is taught, not every student gets it right away. So the teachers already have to make sure the students that don't get it do get it, at the same time helping the students who've already gotten it move on or are challenged doing something maybe similar but not ahead specifically of the other students. So I think the purpose of this is to intentionally differentiate, to intentionally help the students be more successful within all the classes.
So the last thing I'll say about differentiation, I'm going to go this gentleman right here, because he's been
You know,
waiting a while.
I can
Okay,
totally
you're,
burn that.
okay, yes, okay.
Sorry.
No, differentiation occurs in two ways. Differentiation occurs intuitively, so as I'm moving through my class as the teacher, I'm shifting and changing things in the moment because I'm responding to where kids are. But differentiation is also about intentionally planning what I need to do. So I know my kids, I've sat with them in goal set, I've looked at their pre-assessments for that unit, for those skills. I know where they are, and so I'm intentional about what I'm setting up. So I know that we've talked like we're always, as a teacher, coming from behind, like, oh, I'm shocked this student's struggling. Often teachers know ahead of time because they've done the pre-assessment, because they've talked to students and they have a relationship. So just keep in mind, it's twofold. The differentiation is intentional and before the lesson, and intuitively in the midst of the lesson. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for, I'm just thankful for educators like you who are willing to tackle this issue, which is serious. It's courageous work that you're doing, and I'm grateful to live in a district that is forward-thinking. So having said that, thank you. But I am a mom of a very bright 7th grader. Probably there's other people in here like that. And I guess I have lots of questions. I guess I'll start with this. You say that there's going to be options to get honors credits. Is it something that's decided on the first day of school? I'm an honors student here? Or otherwise it doesn't seem fair.
So that's exactly why the merge between honors and college prep is so critical. Because we do know that students often come in to the high school with that label. I'm an honors student, I'm a college prep student. They are 14, they need experiences with rigorous curriculum to decide who they want to be. I love science. Okay, I'm going all in with science. I'm gonna do honors, later I'll do AP. I'm not really fond of English, so I'm just gonna do English. We have to let kids decide who they are. We have to let kids have these experiences and then have conversation with parents and counselors to talk through, who do I want to be and where am I going? That is so very important. The other thing we haven't even touched on is often the kids sitting at the high end, and I'm with you, I've had very bright kids. They need to learn how to navigate this life with kids who are not exactly like them. They will be in college with kids who are not exact learners just like them. They will be in other classes with kids who aren't just like them, that aren't, it's a good skill for them to develop. And so we're gonna do that in the safety of a place where they have support, where they have teachers, counselors, all kinds of people to help them navigate this process. Did that answer your question?
Not really.
So, can I say, your question?
They're gonna get the honors credit.
Yes, so right now there's an earned honors credit, but we have actually a number of classes. We have one literature course, we have a Shakespeare course, and we have it, of course, in the models sequence in the science, physics, chemistry, and bio. And they've experimented with that, and it's grown and shifted over time. And so the way it looks right now, and the way that they've learned that they kind of hold to this isn't the path, is that when you walk into this class, we don't know, right? We don't know. They've set up a series of assessments, right, that are the benchmark assessments aligned to our core standards.
Throughout the year?
Throughout each semester. It's a semester-specific thing. And depending on how students perform on those assessments determines, right, how eligible they are, determines their eligibility, right, for honors credit. And so honors credit is kind of assigned to students' transcripts after the conclusion of the semester based off of the performance on those key, most critical assessments throughout that course. All right, one model sequence is like a year-long project or something. You know, it's a year-long science project that they do, and they demonstrate at the end of the year. And so, it's something that you have to earn throughout your work in the class. All right, it's kind of a pathway to honors. It's not something that you get simply because you're in this class with this teacher and it's already in your transcript before you walk out. Yeah, so that's what earned honors really looks like, and that's the model. Okay.
Is it more work, or is it additional work, or is it
I would, in some ways, I can say yes. All right, you like that answer? But I can also say that really it is deeper learning. It's deeper learning. It's evidence of deeper learning and identified standards in the course. All right. Sometimes you show that by more. Sometimes you show it just by higher quality on the same or different. Right.
So we really want kids. We really want kids. I'm going to just jump. We really want kids to exceed the standard. Exceed. So in science, one of the things they're exploring is this idea of competencies. What are the 5 competencies out of this biology class we really want kids to grasp? Okay, now I've identified the 5 competencies. So if you want earned honors credit, you are going to have to evidence, keep a portfolio, and show me where in competency 1 you exceeded the standard, where in competency 2 you exceeded the standard, and go through all 5 and then you earn your honors. Yeah. So that's kind of the. Here you go, sir. I might have turned it off. Is it on? Is it green? It doesn't look green.
This one's on.
That's good. I just hit it. Oh, it's red. It's battery.
Is this going to be a freshman-only curriculum, or is it going to grow into sophomore, junior?
That's a good question.
So, the plans to detract here, as we're talking about, we are talking about it for freshman year as a way to give access to our curriculum beyond that freshman year. We have no district-wide holistic plan to detract 10 through 12. We are going to, of course, do as all schools do, a curriculum evaluation process 10 through 12, and you can anticipate changes to curriculum as any school should anticipate based off of the products of those evaluations. But detracking, like we're talking about here, this is freshman year as a point of access the moment you come into high school. We said 2 more questions, and thank you for your time.
Feel free to come to us.
I wanted to come out and talk. Yes, I want to be true and respectful of everybody here, so please give questions. Thank you so much.